Hey, what's up? How's it going? It's me, Dakota Fishman, and today I just wanted to go over something that I thought was relatively useful to know. So, as you're going around and, scouting in the game, you're gonna want to find what is known as this. This little building here, yeah, this. It's called an observatory, and it dispels the mist. And believe it or not, if you're going around and you're scouting and you come across this, it will basically dispel the mist on the entire map. Which, yeah, that's kind of helpful. Uh, Now, of course, I don't know. Of course, you've got each area has a gate. So if you run into a gate, you hit a wall. Just keep moving around until you eventually find an observatory. That's really honestly all I can say. Beyond that, the other thing too is if you run into monuments, make sure to do those monument quests. And if you're wondering what I mean by this, what quests? Where? What are you talking about? If all of this does not ring a bell, okay, here's what you do. You discover the monument. You click on the yellow icon down here, and yeah, it tells you to check. And of course, there are some missions which involve basically clicking on villages and spamming villages until you get them, and then that's it. Really quite simple. Uh, Next thing, find a guild and get in a guild pretty quickly. And then of course, eventually, and this is from what I've gathered, most effective ways communication. Tell everybody to A, get to this spot. B, do not, I repeat, do not hit the behemoth until everyone is inside. If you are wanting to be an actual troll and hit the bear, you too are the reason why this game makes me cry inside. But no, really, in all honesty, if you want to do behemoths as a guild, you got to make sure everybody gets in there one legion at a time, and you got to have a proportionate amount of infantry units as magic and your archers. You got to have a proportionate amount. Obviously, you can have like probably 4 infantry armies with enough troops, which in our case was like 15,000 or so T2s per 4 people. That was sufficient to take down when you had like 7 or 8 stacks of 15k magic and or archers. Okay, just to do the level 1 behemoths, that is. Now, I don't really know what is entailed into doing level 3s and level 4s and 2s and so on and so forth, but what I will say is that as you go around gathering and doing your own thing, another really handy thing is, eventually your alliance will be able to build alliance mines. And that's a banger of a gathering reserve, dude. You can't ignore it. It's like a no-brainer. You want to make sure you get into that wonderful, wonderful loot while you can. Now, I will say, as somebody that was starting out, there are a couple of things that you do want to keep an eye on, which is that primarily, most of your time is going to be spent either getting your gathering units and or working on your heroes. And a lot of that is going to be derived from getting CP, which, again, with what other hero combinations you do, I would suggest that you kind of go with whatever you're going to min-max. And by min-maxing it, you're really going to want to focus on things that provide you basically the ability to kill Darklings and or improve your ability to gather. Because these are two things that fundamentally, unless you're spending enormous amounts of money or plan to spend, then you're going to have a large spent of your time working on those heroes. So anything that improves the ability to kill the mobs around you is ultimately going to be beneficial to you in the beginning. Now, later in the game, that's where you're going to want to start to focus more on the PvP aspect of this game. Because naturally, like any other PvP game, if you ain't good, you're gonna get wiped, and that's really, there's not much to it, it's really straightforward, I think. But given the circumstances and the monuments I've found, right? I found the Frozen Spires monument over here. There is a Wolf Shrine monument over here, and this is in Daralan. All right, which is in the world of Frozen Hells. This is what this is. And it's kind of a cool map. I'll say that much. And I really, for the experience that I've gotten so far. But of course, there are other regions, as you might imagine. And we haven't gotten to those yet. But, I just thought I'd bring up the couple of things that I have so far. Naturally, if you do things as a guild, you do your gathering, you're probably going to be just fine. But naturally, there are a few things that you want to definitely keep an eye on. And that is to say, you definitely want to be doing your road to glory. Because, who isn't going to not do these, right? I will say that to a certain extent, I've kind of nitpicked a lot of this to a certain extent. But like Eliana, for example, I think it's kind of a no-brainer. But yeah, when this event goes on, you definitely want to get her. So the only way to do it is you basically gotta get abandoned puppets, which you get from killing Darkling mobs, and then you spawn Darkling armies, aka El Darkilania armies, and you destroy them via rallies, and then you get the medals and so on and so forth. And then once you do, you want to work on getting Eliana, because Eliana has got some really nice bonuses. Now, as opposed to what if I would say is a lot of common knowledge, or the YouTubers that have 50,000 to 100,000, I'm of the opinion as far as hero patterns or picks go, okay, you want to get Thea, you want to get Emrys, and you want to get Velen for your legendaries. Namely, those guys are kick-ass good. Now, that isn't to say that Lilia isn't good. You can get Lilia or magic, okay? The same way you can get Nico if you're wanting to do marksman. And, Nika or Nico, is kind of the difference between archery and infantry. Now, I would say Nika is kind of the comparison to Emrys. But, it's really just more or less whatever you're able to focus in on at the beginning. As far as epics goes, you can kind of see, I pretty much went Walder, okay, for League of Order. But, Guanwin, you can't go wrong with Guanwin, okay? Guanwin's got that peacekeeping, infantry, marksman badassery, and frankly, I like to think this skill right here is pretty damn good. Now, that isn't to say that Walder isn't good, because he is. He's got his place. He's a magic, that's magic, right? But I don't know, man. It's really ultimately, I think, really dependent on what you can get access to. Because, like, if I gotten access to Madeline, right, I'd be using Madeline in combination with Neek. The same way that, I'd be using Velen in comparison with Walder for magic. Or, if I was doing Guanwin, I would be doing Guanwin with, something in tandem with, say, Thea, or I could use her in pairs, and pair her up with someone like, say, a Drag, or I could even go for, maybe even an Indus combination, but I see the one thing I don't care for is you really want to pay very close attention to these, as far as like min-maxing these goes. Obviously, the more spread out you are, which as you can see, I'm very spread out right now in the beginning, but I'll probably begin to focus down more on my gathering heroes a little more hardcore, and then eventually I will start to nitpick the living hell out of whatever I want to focus in on. But ultimately, where I'm at in the game, it's just, when you're starting out, you can kind of play with it. You don't really have to stress one thing or the other. It's just, as you get further and further invested in it, it'll become more and more of a problem. Now, that little ability right there that you've seen I just popped, it's kind of a cool ability because it takes resources. It's really cool. So the thing about artifacts in this game, which I'll touch on that just a little bit, right? Because I think some people are pretty curious what artifacts are good, which ones are bad. I got the Curatus Wrath, and I leveled that sucker up all the way, and then I tacked it on an Infuro. Now, it could have been any Infuro. Honestly, I could have used the Tree Hugger just as much as I could have used the Crazy Ape Man with the frickin' stick and the sword, But I ended up giving it to the Stick Man because, he's gonna put a hell of a bite on most of his fights. So I thought, okay, that'll work for me. But this Curatus Wrath is a hell of a good thing to get, I think, when you're starting out. And your Enchidrion of Advanced Incantations is good for magic. And then, of course, your Bomb Flinger is good for, marksmanship. But, of course, I got the Dragon Rift, which I think is going to be badass if I can get an infantry hero up to par, because that is a hell of a cool artifact there. But needless to say, there's even like the Cloak of Stealth, where you can hide an army. Yeah, that wouldn't at all be interesting. We could basically go around ganking people. Like, whoa, that's kind of an interesting concept. And then there's the Green Finger Sickle, which gives you immediately resources from a chosen resource point and gives you X amount of whatever was in there. It's kind of nice. Needless to say, though, artifacts in this game are a big deal. But, I haven't really been able to dig around and figure out all the nitpicks that are ultimately going to be the most advantageous. But I can tell you that, to a certain extent, that's where the pay-to-win factor comes in. Because you're going to be rolling the dice every single time. Every time you wake up, or every time you throw out your wallet, for the gold chests, for your heroes, and, of course, your artifact swaps for your wonderful, wonderful, wonderful artifacts. So it's kind of I don't know, it's like a mishmash between, obviously a lot of people from ROK are probably familiar with this game. And if you're not familiar with it, and you're, kind of one of my fellow channel members, then I will have you know that this game is very, very much like Rise of Kingdoms. Kind of feels like a reskin in a way. But I think I can also see why a lot of people from the game they're coming to this game and going, yeah, screw that game. Because there's a lot of this that I think I even myself like more than other games around it. Because it's got it's got a certain appeal to it, But ultimately, I will say that, overall impression of the game, as far as what I've gotten out of it, is pretty good. So I just thought I'd go ahead and give you guys a couple of suggestions and tips. And needless to say, thank you guys for watching, and feel free to subscribe to the channel if you're interested in this kind of stuff. So, see ya.